Today I'm going to be telling you all about all the books I read in the month of June. Unfortunately, in June, I had 0 5-star reads, but I liked most of what I read. I didn't have anything I hated. Most of it was really 4 stars or 3.5s, so I had an okay reading month, but I didn't have anything that fully wowed me and blew me away. But honestly, I'll take it because I've had some rough reading months lately, and so this month wasn't too bad. I'll start quickly with the only book I DNF'd this month, which was The Block Party by Jamie Day. This is an ARC copy, so the cover is not like this, it's actually like this. And the publisher very kindly sent me a copy of this, but unfortunately I didn't really get too far into it before I realized it wasn't really going to be for me. I got 107 pages in, so I gave it a decent chance, but it's just a suburban kind of drama type of thriller, and it spends a lot of time in flashbacks, and it just wasn't necessarily hooking me even after 100 pages, so I decided to sit it down. But if you do like suburban dramas with mystery thriller elements, this is a story about this neighborhood where they have this block party every Memorial Day, or is it the 4th of July? I already forgot which holiday it is. Memorial Day. They have the block parties on Memorial Day, and this year at the Memorial Day party, someone ends up dying, and then you get flashbacks to last year's Memorial Day party and the year that has happened since then to try to piece together who it could have been and why they could have died. And it's really just this big neighborhood drama where you're learning all these people who have secrets from one another and who was secretly connected with other people, and you're seeing what happened over the course of the year. Kind of reminds me of Liam Moriarty's writing, so if you like books like that, I would recommend giving it a try. It'll probably be a fun summer read, but for me, I just wasn't necessarily hooked enough to keep reading. My least favorite book of the month was unfortunately my book club pick for the month, which was I Have Some Questions for You by Rebecca Mackay. This was my channel membership book club pick for the month of June. Each month I picked 2 books for the members to vote between, and this was the one that ended up winning. And the goal of the theme for this month was like a literary mystery thriller type of book, something that maybe had a bit more substance to it because I thought that would be good for a discussion. But unfortunately, this book tried to have too much substance to it, and then it ended up having not a lot really to say, in my opinion, by the end. This is a story about this woman who is returning back to the boarding school that she went to as a teen. She is going there to teach for a mini-mester. Right now, she is a podcaster, and she's going to be teaching a course on podcasting and also a course on film. And being there and starting that class starts to stir up some memories for her because back when she was attending the boarding school, her roommate ended up murdered and a guy got put away and went to jail for it. But now that she's teaching this podcasting class, one of her students wants to do a podcast on the murder of that girl, and the student is convinced that the wrong person was convicted for the murder, and she is digging up old things trying to figure out who maybe did actually murder this girl. This story is very heavily a literary fiction story. It makes no mistakes by marketing itself as that. However, I know that synopsis sounds more like a mystery thriller, and so I knew what I was getting myself into going into this one because I looked out for reviews. I was fully aware it was going to be a literary fiction, but it was still even more boring to me than I expected it to be. It's very, very slow. I will say the writing is very good though. I did really like the writing style of this, but I just felt like the book dragged on for a very, very, very long time, and it started to go in a lot of different directions. There's a lot of little different pieces of the story that come together, and it's almost touching on like too many themes in my opinion, but we had a really good discussion about it in my book club show, which is available in my membership playlist for my book club picks, which will be linked down below. If you're a member, you will be able to watch those. If you become a member, you can go back and watch those at any time. And one of the revelations that we came to while we were reading a Q&A that the author did is this seems to be intentional on the author's part. She wanted to write a book that asks a lot of questions and doesn't really provide a lot of answers, and so I think she accomplished what she was trying to do because there's a lot of different themes that come up in this story about cancel culture, about grooming, about our justice system and it being unfair and lazy, about prejudice, about outsiders and groups. There's a lot of different things this book opens conversations about, but it just didn't fully come together for me. And I guess the author wasn't trying to do that, but I find that to be really satisfying when a book has a lot of different themes that come together really well. And this book just seems to be asking some questions, and that just wasn't really for me. So this ended up being a 2-star for me. I did not personally love it, but it is a great cover. I'll give it that at least. Next up is a short story collection called 19 Missing Claws and a Blackbird by Augustina Bastarrica, who is the same author of Tender is the Flesh. I was granted access to an arc of this book as an ebook through NetGalley from the publisher, so thank you very much to the publisher for sending me access to this one. I believe this was 19 stories, although I was reading someone's Goodreads review as I was reading the collection because they reviewed each individual story, and so I would read the story and then read their little blurb, and it was just a fun little way to feel like I was buddy reading with someone. I'll link that review down below if anyone's curious. And looking at their breakdown of it, it adds up to 20 stories. So it's 19 or 20 short stories, and it's a very small collection, under 200 pages. So the stories are very, very short. Some of them are like 2 minutes long. Some of them are like 10 minutes long. I only know the time because I was reading it as an ebook copy, so I don't know page count wise. But there's some that are super, super short, and then some that are a little bit longer of a short story. I'm not really sure the best way to describe this collection because it's just a lot of different things, a lot of different types of stories that are looking into the depravity of humanity, dark impulses, the psychology of humans, and some stories that I frankly just didn't even really understand. I ended up giving this full collection a 3-star because there were some stories that I really, really enjoyed. There were some stories that I didn't really get, and then there were a lot of stories that I thought were just okay, and so that all averages out to about a 3 for me. I will say the stories that I enjoyed the most out of this collection and the ones that stick with me is the first story, which is called A Light, Swift, and Monstrous Sound. I thought that was a really, really good intro to the collection. The third story, Unamuno's Boxes, I'm not sure if I'm saying that totally correctly, but that was a really interesting little short story about a girl in an Uber, and that one I really liked. Story 5, Anita and Happiness, which was an interesting story about this guy who thinks he's dating an alien. Story 6, called Dishwasher, which is about this woman who is kind of losing her mind. This one wasn't a favorite for me, but I did think it was interesting. Story 8, Perfect Symmetry. It's about this guy making a crepe. That's all I really am going to say about that one. Story 19, Mary Carmenum, which was this weird, like, culty type of story. And then the last story, story 20, called The Solitary Ones, which just had the best atmosphere and was such a good way to close out the collection. It's about this woman who is getting on the subway and then the lights go out. And that's all I'll say about that one. So there's a good amount of stories that really stick with me in this one that I did really enjoy, but there's equally as many stories where I'm like, what was that? I don't understand what that story was trying to do. It went by so fast that it feels like it didn't even happen. There was one story about a person who wants to be a circle, and that one was just really, really bizarre to me. So it was really like strong hits or strong misses and then a lot in the middle. So it really comes out like an average, 3 to me. But I did really enjoy Tender is the Flesh from this author, and then there were a couple really good stories in this one that caught my attention as well. So I am still gonna be keeping an eye out for this author to see what they do next. Short story collections are always a little wonky for me, so hopefully if this author comes out with a novel next, I will enjoy that even more. Next up is a horror novella called Helpmeet by Nabin Ruthnam, which I believe is a pen name. I believe this author writes in a couple different names, so I don't really know who this author really is. But this is a very short little book that is set at the end of the 19th century, and it's about this woman who is caring for her ailing husband. This is a story of body horror. There's a lot of body horror in it, so if you don't like that, maybe stay away from it. But I ended up giving this one a 3.5. I thought it was a very atmospheric story. It caught my attention very quickly once I realized the weird body horror things that were going on, and it just had a really nice, eerie, unsettling tone to it the whole time. It's not a new favorite horror novella for me, but it was a good time. It was a short little read, and if you like dark, weird body horror type of novellas, I would definitely recommend giving it a try. I don't want to tell you too much more about it though, because it is a short story and it's a pretty basic premise, and I don't want to give anything away. Next up is another 3.5-star read, which was 0 Days by Ruth Ware. I did end up doing an entire dedicated reading vlog. You can see my full thoughts in that video. I also did a spoiler section where I gave full spoilers into what happened in the book in case you have read the book and you want a refresher, or if you didn't read the book and you just want to know what happens, you can go check out that video and see all of those details. And then my full review of what I liked and what I didn't like so much in this book. My favorite experience with this book was the beginning and realizing what was going on in the story, because I totally forgot the synopsis of it like I usually do with books, and it was just a really fun first 40 pages just jumping into it and letting the story shape itself in front of me. And so I want to not tell you too much about it, honestly, because I think that was a really fun experience to have. And overall the book wasn't great to me. It ended up just being 3.5, but the beginning was some some of my favorite parts of it. And so if you want to know what it's about, you can go read the synopsis yourself. I'm not going to tell it to you because I think that was a fun way to experience the book. But generally, it is about a person who is on the run. I'll tell you that. I think this was something a little bit different for Ruth Ware. It reads a little bit differently than some of her more recent books have. It's a bit more crime procedural slash action-y thriller. Not too action-y, don't get your hopes up. It's not that much of a popcorn thriller, but it just has a little bit more action to it. And it is less of a murder mystery, though there are those elements in here. It's not like a traditional kind of cozier feeling murder mystery like I feel like Ruth Ware usually does. This is more of the crime procedural action-y thriller. Honestly, all of these things don't feel like a great description of it. I feel like I don't even know the best way to set expectations for this, and so I worry if I say like it's an action-y thriller, someone's gonna pick it up and be like, it was so boring. I agree with you, not a lot happened. But I also don't want to just say it's a murder mystery and then you're like, this was not a fun murder mystery. There was like nothing to solve here because it was really obvious what was going on. So I don't know. I mean, it was fine. I always read Ruth Ware's books. I always have an okay time with them. It was an okay time. If you like reading her books, pick it up. If you want to get started with her books, this is probably not the one I'd recommend because it does feel a little different from the other ones. So I'd recommend something like The Turn of the Key, maybe The Death of Mrs. Westaway to get started. I have 4 more books to talk about and they were all 4-star books. The first one is This Is Where We Talk Things Out by Caitlin Marceau, which was the buddy read for the 24-hour horror-a-thon. This month, Deja from Deja's Book World was my co-host, and so we did live reading sprints together and we both read the entirety of this book together live. So you could always go back and watch those sprints if you wanted to catch our updates and how we talked about the book and what we thought as we were reading it. This is a short little horror novella about this woman who has been estranged from her mother for quite some time, but she is deciding to give her mom another chance, and they are getting together and going to stay at this cabin where it is isolated and snowy and things get weird. And I feel like that's all you really need to know about it. I will caution you for toxic family relationships. If that is something that triggers you, this book may be triggering. It was definitely frustrating to read, even with that not being something that's a specific trigger for me, so just caution you for that. But it is a very quick little, short little read. I thought the characters were depicted well, the atmosphere was depicted well. There were a couple fun little surprises in here, a couple things that weren't super surprising. So all in all, it ended up being about a 4-star for me. I had a good time. It's not necessarily a brand new favorite top tier horror novella, but this was this author's debut novella and I would definitely check out more from them in the future. Next up is a romance, Happy Place by Emily Henry. I did talk about this in my video where I talked about my top 13 books of 2023 so far, so you probably already know that I did enjoy this one. I'm a big fan of Emily Henry's adult romances. People We Meet on Vacation is my absolute top tier favorite one. This one probably comes next, and then Book Lovers, and then Beach Read. But I just love how Emily Henry develops her stories. I love how real her characters feel. I love how real the problems they face feel, because I'm not a huge romance reader and so I can't speak to the genre a lot, but I used to read a lot of romance, like, God, 10 years ago? I didn't realize it had been that long. But yeah, I used to read like a lot of Colleen Hoover, Taryn Fisher, Abby Glines, those sorts of contemporary romance books. So I'm not as caught up on like what the romance genre is like today. I mean, I've read some things, but I don't read the genre very heavily. But I just feel like Emily Henry does stand out as someone who's writing really real romance. Plus, they're not just romance books. Like, they bring in other aspects of love as well, familial love, found family, your love with your friendships, and platonic love. And they just feel so real. They feel so adult, they feel so mature, and they also feel so sweet. And she has great banter. If you've heard about Emily Henry, you've probably heard about her banter between her characters. I feel like that is what she is known for, is being able to create really witty banter that creates such great chemistry between the characters, and that just has you like giggling and kicking your feet and feeling like you're just falling in love for the first time again. I just feel like her books are so special and so magic, and she is just one of the few, if not the only, romance authors out there nowadays that will get me to pick up a romance book and that will give me a really fun time. And this one, you're following this couple who has been together for a long time, but they have secretly broken up and not told their friends because they're all part of the same friend group, and now the friend group's getting back together and they have to pretend like they're still together. So it's a little bit of fake dating, it's a little bit of second chance romance, and it's just a really sweet little summer book that I just really enjoyed. Next up is Look Closer by David Ellis. This is a thriller that I did a dedicated reading vlog to as well, so you could check that out to see my full thoughts and experiences with this one. This is a story about this married couple, Vicky and Simon. They seem like a great couple, but there's a lot of secrets to unpack in this story. It begins with this rich, beautiful woman ending up murdered, and then the story just kicks off from there. It is definitely a cat and mouse type of thriller. You get multiple perspectives, and there's a lot of secrets, deceit, lies, betrayal, all the buzzwords in this one, and it was a pretty fun time. I did have my hopes up quite high for it because I've heard so many great things about this. I've heard so many 5-star reviews. I've heard about mind-blowing twists and it just being so fast-paced, and so I was going into it with really high expectations. It did not get that 5-star for me, but it was a 4-star. I did think it was a pretty fun time. It read really quickly. There were a ton of little reveals throughout, and it did have one huge jaw-dropping twist that really caught me at the end that I did not see coming, and I was like, oh, how did that happen? How did I not see that coming? And that was really fun. My main complaint is I think it's just too long. It's a really long thriller. It's over 400 pages, and I think if it would have cut 100 pages and just gotten more compact and less repetitive, it probably could have been a 5 for me, but either way, a 4 is still a really good rating. This was my first read from this author. I'm not necessarily interested in diving into his backlist really at all, but I don't know, maybe that could change. If someone hypes up another one of his books, maybe I'll get FOMO again and feel the need to pick it up. And finally is another book that made it on my favorites of the year so far list, and that is Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. This is the first book I've read from R.F. Kuang, and I did have high expectations because I have heard so many amazing things about her writing, but I've never personally read from her before, so I didn't know if it was going to be a fit for me. And I know this is more of a literary fiction that had some mystery, thriller, suspense elements in it, so I really wasn't sure if this was going to be something that fit really well for me or not, but I did end up having a really good time with it. As I said, it was a 4-star, and in this story you are following this woman named June, who is a white woman, and her friend Athena, who is an Asian woman, dies under some tragic circumstances. They are both writers. Athena was far more successful than June was, and June has never really felt like it's fair. And once Athena dies, June gets her hands on a manuscript that Athena was working on, and June decides to publish that story herself and act like she wrote it all along. It's a story about Chinese laborers during the war, and so there are a lot of conversations about racial injustice in it, and that sparks a lot of conversations amongst the public and the industry as a white woman publishes this book. But also, this white woman decides to make herself appear more racially ambiguous in her author photo. She creates a new pseudonym, and she never, well, she does, but like initially she doesn't explicitly tell people that she's white. She kind of lets people think that she might also be Chinese so that she has more of a place to be speaking on these things and to be writing this book. And so it becomes this story about her trying to get away with all of these lies, the lies that she wrote this book, and the deceit over her own racial identity. And it's kind of like a runaway train story from there. That happens in the beginning, and then you're seeing, is she going to be able to get away with it? The best thing about this book, in my opinion, is the writing style and the voice of the character. The character in this has such a strong voice. It was so fun to read. It was so compulsively readable and so easy to keep turning the pages. And it was just a really captivating character in a really captivating situation to see what was all going to happen. And it was really good at bringing in a lot of conversations about the publishing industry, a lot of things that'll feel really familiar to people who are very intimate with the book community, and a lot of things that will be really great conversation starters for people who aren't as familiar with the book community and will be introduced to some of these issues. So overall, really good time, really enjoyed it. Definitely will be checking out more from this author. So that is it for all the books that I read this month. It was a little bit of a lighter reading month and a little bit of an underwhelming one since I don't have any 5-star new favorites to tell you about. But out of this stack, 2 books did make it onto my favorites of 2023 so far list, which included both 4 stars and 5 stars. So that's nice, at least that I had some books that made it into that grouping, and at least it wasn't a ton of books that I hated, because I've definitely had some months like that recently. But let me know down in the comments below how your reading month went. Let me know if you had any new favorites, and let me know if you're going to be picking up any of the books that I talked about. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye!